This week on
Hello and welcome. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up in the next hour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, reiterates dialogue and diplomacy are the way forward to resolve Russia-Ukraine conflict. In a first such incident, Japan alleges that a Chinese surveillance plane violated its airspace, responds by scrambling jets and terms it utterly unacceptable, summons Chinese embassy official. An Israeli military says a hostage kidnapped on the 7th of October has been rescued in Gaza. 52-year-old Khaled Farhan Al-Qari's condition is said to be normal and he's reunited with his family. Also, nuclear watchdog IAEA chief warns of a risk of nuclear accident at Russian plant in the Kursk region. Moscow says the plant has been repeatedly attacked by Ukrainian forces. And Jay Shah is elected unopposed as independent chair of International Cricket Council. BCCI secretary will assume the position from Greg Barclay starting the 1st of December. First up, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is raging on, with each side claiming further military successes against the other each passing day. But amid the ongoing military clashes and missile attacks, fresh diplomatic efforts are being taken forward, like the one made by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's had phone conversations with US President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin over the last 2 successive days as a follow-up to his Moscow and Kyiv visits in recent weeks. Prasar Bharati has more.
The tensions on the Ukraine's border with Russia are at their highest in years as both sides continue to engage in heavy exchange of attacks. Reiterating India's firm stand to support an early, abiding and peaceful resolution on the conflict, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with Russian President Putin. The two leaders exchanged views on the ongoing conflict. Prime Minister shared insights from his recent visit to Ukraine and underlined the importance of dialogue and diplomacy, as well as sincere and practical engagement between all stakeholders to achieve an abiding and peaceful resolution of the conflict. While discussing the situation in Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi also briefed US President Joe Biden on his recent visit to Ukraine. He reiterated India's consistent position in favor of dialogue and diplomacy. With plans to end the conflict, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Tuesday that conflict will end with dialogue, but Kiev needs strong position. Zelensky has also planned to present a plan with Democratic and Republican US presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Operation in the Kursk region is part of the plan about which I will be talking with the President Biden. The main point of this plan is to force Russia to end the conflict, and I really want to end it on fair terms for Ukraine. If the plan is accepted and delivered, which is also very important, if these two elements work together, then we believe that our main aim will be reached.
Ukraine's top commander said Russia decreased activity in the south as it pulled troops to Kursk, where over 600 Russian soldiers were captured.
As of today, we are continuing to advance and cause tangible losses to the Russian military. We have taken control of over 1,294 square kilometers, which includes 100 settlements.
Meanwhile, Moscow has alleged US involvement in Kursk incursion as an obvious fact.
West wants to avoid excessive escalation, but in truth, it is not so. The West doesn't want to avoid escalation. The West, how we say in Russia, is looking for trouble.
In retaliation, Russia launched several waves of missile and drone attacks, targeting scores of Ukrainian regions and killing at least 5 people. The chief of United Nations atomic watchdog, Rafael Grossi, inspected Kursk's atomic power plant where he said that the region is prone to nuclear incident and pledged international community that nuclear plant should never be attacked.
The fact that the plant is operating make it even more serious in terms of an eventual action against it. When a plant is operating, the temperature is much higher, and if there was the case of an impact or something that could affect there would be serious consequences.
During Tuesday's attack, 3 people were injured in the Zaporizhzhia region and 4 were hurt in a missile strike on northeastern region of Kharkiv overnight. Bureau Report, DD India.
Let's get you more on this with DD India's Dasha Chernashova joining us from Moscow. Good evening to you, Dasha. Now, what has the Kremlin had to say about the phone conversation between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin?
Well, indeed, the Kremlin has confirmed this phone conversation, saying that the Indian Prime Minister has informed President Vladimir Putin about his recent trip to Ukraine and has stressed his interest in contributing to the negotiated settlement or between Russia and Ukraine in this ongoing conflict. The Russian president, on his side, Moscow says, has given his principal assessment of the destructive line of the Kiev authorities and, quote, their Western advisors, outlining the key concerns from Moscow. Also, the sides have been talking about the issues that are related to the bilateral relations, including trade, and the upcoming BRICS summit that is going to take place in Russia's city of Kazan in October. Moscow says the Indian Prime Minister has confirmed his intention to travel to Kazan and to take part in it personally.
All right. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has clearly indicated that the Kursk offensive is part of a larger plan to force Russia's hand when it comes to a negotiated peace deal. What is President Putin doing to maintain an upper hand?
Well, certainly in Moscow there is a very different assessment of this Ukrainian incursion of Russia's Kursk region, with Moscow stressing that this incursion has made it impossible to hold any sort of peace negotiations with Ukraine at the moment, with any sort of negotiated settlement becoming simply irrelevant because of this Kursk offensive. As for the Russian actions, we understand there will be a response to this Kursk offensive, and that's not going to be just one decision or one step. There's going to be the whole complex of issues that Moscow is going to undertake with regards to this offensive. But first of all, we understand the Russian authorities are focusing on the defense of its own borders and its own territory, on squeezing out, as they describe it, the Ukrainian armed forces from the Kursk region and protecting the civilian population, who have indeed suffered a lot, both in the Belgorod region and in the Kursk region that are neighboring and bordering Ukraine.
All right. Dasha Chernashova, thank you for joining us from Moscow. Now, a new variant of Mpox, KL1B, has been detected in Africa. Scientists studying the new strain report that the virus is evolving faster than expected. The World Health Organization has called for $135 million to tackle the outbreaks in Central Africa. With the new Clade 1B strain spreading rapidly, urgent action is required. After Germany, now Spain has announced to donate 500,000 Mpox vaccine doses to contain the virus. Syed Afsar Hussain has filed this report.
The head of the World Health Organization called for global concerted action to control a new Mpox outbreak, announcing a response plan that will require at least $135 million over the next 6 months, starting September 2024 to February 2025. They also said that outbreaks of Mpox in Central Africa can be stopped. Scientists studying the new Mpox strain say the virus is changing faster than expected and often in areas where experts lack the funding and equipment to properly track it. They acquired ability to transmit among humans. A new strain of the virus known as Clade 1B has the world's attention again after the WHO declared a new health emergency.
Mpox is evolving rapidly. The fact that Clade 2B evolved over a period of 5 years to a new strain, and now we are having Clade 1 evolving rapidly to a new strain. We are not too sure what new strain will emerge in future and the implication of such new strains.
Clade 1b is a mutated version of Clade 1, a form of Mpox spread by contact with infected animals that has been endemic in Congo for decades. Mpox typically causes flu-like symptoms and pus-filled lesions and can kill. According to the WHO, Congo has reported over 18,000 suspected cases of Clade 1 and Clade 1b Mpox, with 615 deaths this year. Additionally, there have been 222 confirmed Clade 1b cases across 4 African countries in the past month, along with 1 case each in Sweden and Thailand, both linked to travel history in Africa. Sayyid Absarul Hassan's report for DD India.
For more on this, let's take a look at this report sent by DD India's Daniel Kijo.
A team of researchers from the United States, Europe and Africa briefed the media on the pace at which the Mpox virus's new strain is mutating. Dr. Dimir Ogiona, a specialist in infectious diseases at the Niger Delta University Hospital in Nigeria, said there is much to learn about the outbreak, including its modes of transmission, the illness's severity and associated risk factors. The research community says the virus is not only mutating swiftly, but also spawning new variants. The Clade 1b variant represents a version of Mpox traditionally transmitted through contact with infected animals and has been a long-standing endemic issue in the Democratic Republic of Congo, leading to symptoms such as fever, body aches, pulsating lesions, and potentially fatal outcomes. The World Health Organization has recently labeled it as a public health emergency of international concern. The WHO announced a funding initiative of $135 million aimed at enhancing outbreak surveillance, strengthening preventative measures, and upgrading overall outbreak preparedness and response strategies. The investment plan aims to speed up research efforts and guarantee equitable distribution of healthcare solutions, including vaccines and diagnostic tools. Recent data from the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that there have been more than 21,000 suspected Mpox infections and more than 590 deaths reported across 13 member states of the African Union from the beginning of 2024 to the middle of August. Daniel Kijo in Dar es Salaam reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. Canada will impose a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle imports. Mark Zuckerberg tells a committee of US lawmakers that the Biden administration pressured Meta to censor COVID-19 and Hunter Biden-related content.
This week on Defense Dynamics, we will tell you about defense and diplomacy panning out from Poland, Ukraine and right up to United States of America. What does this mean in real tangible terms? How does this underscore India's multipolar worldview by exercising strategic autonomy and much more? Also, what's the strategic implication of Indian military officers being stationed with different US commands? Watch Defense Dynamics this week on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. IST on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, Canada, following the lead of the United States, will impose a 100% tariff hike on Chinese electric vehicle imports. The country is also planning to impose a 25% duty hike on Chinese steel and aluminium. The duties apply to all EVs shipped from China, which would include those made by Tesla. Canada's duties on Chinese EVs are due to come into effect from the 1st of October, while those on steel and aluminium will be implemented from the 15th of October. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said Ottawa will continue to work with the US and other allies to ensure that customers around the world are not unfairly penalized by non-market practices of countries such as China. The European Union this month imposed tariffs of up to 36.3% on imports of Chinese-made EVs. Let's get you more on this with DD India's Kate Fisher joining us live from Washington, D.C. Hello, Kate. China has already taken the EU to the WTO against its more modest EV tariff hikes compared to the US and Canada. Now, is that what we could also expect in this case as well?
Hello, yes, well, they haven't yet done so, but you're right. If the past is anything to go by, then they are very likely to take them to the WTO. China has urged Canada to, quote, immediately correct its wrong practices and said that Beijing would take any necessary measures to defend the rights and interests of Chinese companies. So it does look like retaliation is very likely, and they've done that in the past, as you say, when trade tariffs were imposed by other countries, the US, for example, and the EU. But it is more symbolic since the World Trade Organization rulings on trade disputes are supposed to take 6 months after an adjudication panel is set up, but they often take longer. And the top appeals bench has been paralysed since 2019. The US has been opposing appointments to that bench. So basically, at this point, going to the WTO is a bit of a dead end. That is until this top court's reinstated.
Right. Now, are the latest moves being seen as a further intensification of a global trade war, which could have far-reaching consequences even for nations like India?
Well, the general consensus is yes, it all brings uncertainty. And if Donald Trump comes back to power here in the US, that trade war is likely to get worse. And of course, the Democrats are now also largely in the anti-China camp when it comes to trade. So they're cracking down on it as well. That could benefit India, of course, as the US looks to other countries to import goods from. But there could also be negatives, like look at the steel industry, for an example. It's already causing issues for India's domestic steel after the US increased tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminium earlier this year. It's encouraged China, the world's biggest producer, to offload its surplus stocks that it can't now sell to the US by offering competitive rates to Indian buyers. And that in turn is hurting India's domestic steel producers. So there is general uncertainty about what this means, not just for the US, China and Canada, but for the whole world. And that uncertainty is made more uncertain by the fact that we don't know who's going to be in the White House next year.
Yes, certainly ripe ground for unforeseen consequences, not the obvious ones like the Tesla stock taking a beating. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Kate. Now, Meta founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg has made a stinging revelation about US President Joe Biden that might heavily impact the ongoing presidential campaign in America. Zuckerberg made these revelations in a letter written to a committee of US lawmakers. In his letter, he has, charged that in 2021, the Biden administration and its officials pressured him to censor content related to COVID-19 during the global pandemic, and that he regrets the company's decision to accede to the demands. In another revelation, Zuckerberg accused the officials of a premier US investigating agency, warning him to suppress content related to corruption charges about the then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. And DD India's Caroline Malone has sent us this report from Washington, D.C. about this entire episode.
On the judiciary led by Jim Jordan. So he wrote this letter, and in it he essentially says he regrets his actions from 2021, that if he was faced with the same decisions he wouldn't do the same thing again. Ultimately what happened was he was pressurized by the Biden administration, he says, and due to that he decided to take down some content related to the pandemic, to COVID-19. The concern over that being that at the time it was very controversial, and the early days of the pandemic a lot of people had a lot of conspiracy theories online. One of them that was quite prominent was about people drinking bleach to protect their health. That was the kind of thing that people were alleging should be taken down at the time. But Zuckerberg saying in particular, he took down satire and humor comments that were being made on his platforms, but that he wouldn't do it again. Now, Republican lawmakers see this as a victory, really, that he's admitted in their eyes to censoring on, a tech platform, on a social media platform. That's part of this wider investigation they're doing into all social media. Remember at the time, on Twitter, as it was then called, Trump was actually also kicked off the platform for promoting conspiracy theories that at some times people thought could promote violence. That's obviously now changed with Elon Musk taking over. It's now X. So there is a slightly different era, you could say, in social media. But the debate does remain. What role does government have in controlling, potentially censoring, or allowing freedom of speech on social media? The White House, though, in response to this debate, says they stand by their decision, that they believe that big tech should play a role in considering the effects of what information is put out there, particularly for the American people, while also remaining independent.
We can all see what's happening with Durov of Telegram fame in any case. Now, a much anticipated US presidential debate next month between Vice President and Democratic Party nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee and former US President Donald Trump has been thrown into question over the subject of muted mics as the Republican threatens to pull out. Trump further raised doubts when he raised questions on the neutrality of the broadcaster, that's ABC News. The Trump and Harris campaigns have been locked in disagreement Monday over whether each candidate's microphone would be muted when the other speaks. This was, of course, the case during Trump's debate in June with President Joe Biden. But Harris is pushing for a return to the norm of keeping microphones on. The Trump camp maintains that the debate should occur under the already agreed conditions, but the former president is reported to have undermined his own side by saying he would prefer to lose the mute button. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has warned that fixing Britain's problems and undoing the harm caused by the previous government will take a long time, saying that the situation will get worse before it gets better. He also acknowledged that the upcoming October budget will be challenging but necessary due to the inherited economic circumstances.
Budget coming in October, and it's going to be painful. We have no other choice given the situation that we're in. Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden, and that's why we're cracking down on non-doms. Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up.
Now, 52-year-old Israeli hostage Khaed Farhan Al-Qadi has been rescued from a tunnel in the southern Gaza Strip after more than 10 months. Meanwhile, Israel's army has released a video showing strikes on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon and has vowed to rescue the final hostages held by the Hamas.
The visuals on your screen is of 52-year-old Israeli hostage Khaed Farhan Al-Qadi, who was rescued after over 10 months in the southern Gaza Strip on Tuesday. He's a member of the Bedouin community in southern Israel, had been transferred to hospital and his medical condition was normal. Israel's army released video on Monday showing strikes on multiple Hezbollah infrastructures across southern Lebanon.
Welcome
home, Farhan Al-Qadi. I commend the IDF and the ISA for another successful rescue operation. We are working relentlessly to return all of our hostages. We are doing this in two main ways, negotiations and a rescue operation.
We cannot go into many details of this special operation, but I can share that Israeli commandos rescued Khaed Farhan Al-Qadi from an underground tunnel following accurate intelligence. His medical condition is stable and he will undergo examination in hospital.
The West Asia conflict continued to intensify further with ongoing missile exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah, Iran's reaction to the killing of a Hamas leader, and frequent Israeli evacuation orders for Gaza residents. Meanwhile, Iran gave a statement on Monday of its definite revenge for the recent killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh.
The Islamic Republic of Iran will not fall into media games and provocations and will decide how and when its revolutionary action will be taken. The axis of resistance will carry out these revenges according to their capabilities and measures. We witnessed a part of this yesterday.
On the other hand, due to an increase in Israeli army operations in Gaza, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency said that the frequent evacuation orders are disrupting humanitarian aid efforts.
We've counted 16. These evacuation orders, I think as you've been told just this morning from various people, make our work nearly impossible. Part of protecting civilians is ensuring that civilians can eat, that people can wash themselves, they have access to medicine, they have access to the most basic needs that human beings need to survive.
As the conflict deepens and ceasefire negotiations struggle to gain traction, the situation in West Asia remains highly volatile. Ravindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
Let's now take a look at some other stories making news around the world. Disaster Management and Relief Advisor of Bangladesh, Farooq-e-Azam, has said on Tuesday no new areas have been flooded after India opened 109 gates of the Farakka barrage when parts of the country have been reeling from a catastrophic flood. The advisor said the government is working in coordination with all concerned in relief distribution. In Sri Lanka, the National People's Power, led by Anurakumara Dasanayake, has released its election manifesto. The manifesto focuses on several areas, including addressing corruption-related matters. Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe's supporters have criticized the document, saying it lacks clarity on the financial provisions required to fulfill its promises or the methods to secure such funding, creating a sense of wishful thinking. 13 passengers were safely rescued after being stuck for around 90 minutes on the Vortex ride at SeaWorld in Australia's Gold Coast. The ride unexpectedly halted, leaving them suspended several feet in the air. Food and umbrellas were provided until they were lowered to the ground with a cherry picker. A recent volcanic eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula in southwestern Iceland sent a plume of sulfur dioxide southeast to reach northern and western Europe. European Union's Copernicus atmosphere monitoring system released an animation showing the plume of sulfur dioxide as it moved towards Europe after the volcano erupted. The monitoring service said that the plume is not expected to have major impact on air quality or health. And still to come on DD India News Hour, we'll be talking about the Japanese accusation of its airspace breach by a Chinese surveillance aircraft with our expert guest, former senior diplomat, Ambassador Gurjeet Singh. And the International Monetary Fund declares India as the world's fastest growing economy, large economy again. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Gautam Roy, and before we go any further, another look at our top stories. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Retraced dialogue and diplomacy are the way forward to resolve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In a first such incident, Japan alleges that a Chinese surveillance plane violated its airspace, responds by scrambling jets and terms it utterly unacceptable, summons Chinese embassy official. And the Israeli military says a hostage kidnapped on the 7th of October has been rescued alive in Gaza. 52-year-old Khaed Farhan Al-Qari's condition is said to be normal and he's been reunited with his family. Also, nuclear watchdog IAEA chief warns of a risk of nuclear accident at Russian plant in the Kursk region. Moscow says the plant has been repeatedly attacked by Ukrainian forces. Now, from military confrontations and hostilities over territorial disputes on land and at sea, China has now also breached the aerial frontier with Japan for the first time. It's led to an ugly diplomatic row between the two Asian powers. Here are the details.
In a first such instance, a Chinese Y-9 surveillance plane is alleged to have violated Japan's airspace on Monday. The breach took place at Danjo Islands, to the west of the southern island of Kyushu, for about 2 minutes at 11:29 a.m. Japan responded by scrambling jets and termed the breach utterly unacceptable, summoning a Chinese embassy official in Tokyo in protest.
This is the first time we have confirmed and publicly announced a breach of our airspace by a Chinese military aircraft since we began taking measures against acts violating our airspace. Such airspace breach by Chinese military aircraft is not only a serious violation of Japan's sovereignty, but it also threatens our security, which is totally unacceptable.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian responded saying that the relevant departments in China were still trying to understand the situation, while implying that the breach was unintended.
The two sides have maintained communication through existing working channels. I would also like to emphasize that China has no intention of invading the airspace of any country.
Apart from military aircraft, a China State Oceanic Administration plane violated Japan's airspace in 2012. A China Coast Guard drone also violated Japan's airspace in 2017. Tokyo also recently flagged the presence of Chinese ships in the waters of the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. China claims the Senkaku Islands, calling them Diaoyus. The islands are inhabited but are believed to have oil and gas reserves. Japan's Okinawa Island is also another flashpoint. Okinawa is home to the largest US military base in the Asia-Pacific region. China also has territorial disputes with Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam and Indonesia in the region. Japan's airspace violation charge follows close on the heels of a series of clashes and incidents in air and at sea over the past week between China and the Philippines. According to the Philippines National Maritime Council, Chinese aircraft engaged in reckless maneuvers near a civilian plane patrolling the Scarborough Shoal and Subi Reef. Chinese vessels reportedly harassed a Philippine government ship on a resupply mission to support local fishermen at Sabina Shoal, using tactics such as blocking, ramming and deploying water cannons on Sunday. And what could annoy China further is US Indo-Pacific Command Chief saying American warships could escort Philippine vessels on resupply missions in the South China Sea.
Would the US consider, certainly within the context of consultations, every option between the two sovereign nations in terms of our mutual defense? Escort of one vessel to the other is an entirely reasonable option within our mutual defense treaty among this close alliance between the two of us.
With the world already reeling under the impact of two conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, teetering on the brink of escalation, the question is, could a third be avoided? Gautam Roy's report for DD India.
Let's talk about this further. We have our expert guest joining us now, Ambassador Gurjeet Singh, former senior diplomat, is with us. What do you make of this incident, first of all, Ambassador Singh, because China seems to be suggesting that it's happened inadvertently?
Well, China always wants to believe that its actions are always misunderstood, whereas it is actually an innocent party. But given the state of distrust with China and their record in the Senkakus, with the Philippines, with Indonesia, and with Taiwan, and of course with India, nobody quite believes that they are an innocent standby person in this and they are doing it inadvertently. The Chinese are testing Japanese defenses, undoubtedly. And while earlier they were doing it around the Senkakus, more recently, Chinese aircraft and ships have traversed the straits near Hokkaido in the north of Japan. But this is the first time I have heard of them coming near the Nagasaki prefecture in the deep southwest. So this is expanding the area of contention and probing Japanese defenses. I think in about 2 minutes, they saw that the Japanese reacted quickly with several planes going up. But this is what this effort was, to check the state of readiness of Japan.
Right. Now, what is China, apart from the state of readiness, because it's not just Japan that it's had such confrontations with or has had such misadventures with, it's with Taiwan, which is under US protection. It's with in the waters, it's with the Philippines, it's with Indonesia as well, with Vietnam. So all these eventually bring it up to some sort of a confrontational situation with the Americans, doesn't it?
Indeed. So the Chinese claim that under the 9-dash line, they have claims over the entire South China Sea, and therefore they shelve the territorial claims over islands and islets of Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. Indonesia has no territorial claim, but they claim part of the Indonesian EEZ in the Natuna Sea. So with every country, they are trying a different tactic. With Taiwan, it is a larger issue of them saying this is my territory and I would like to integrate it. And meanwhile, they keep testing the defenses, they keep intruding repeatedly across the median line, both through the Navy and the Air Force. The Philippines have now been in the forefront of this action because under the current president, Marcos Jr., the Philippines have decided to take on the Chinese. Now, the Philippines Navy and Coast Guard are not strong. So the Philippines has accentuated their treaty with the United States and Japan and also have new arrangements with Australia to strengthen their hand. They have a grounded ship on a remote islet which they use to buttress their claim on that island. Now, whenever they want to resupply it, the Chinese Coast Guard is going and intruding. Now, they are not shooting, but they are banging their boats, they are using lasers, they are threatening them with clubs. So it is a very primitive kind of physical action. And this is how China intends to have its claim on the South China Sea clearly shown up. This is a very difficult situation for a country like Philippines because they do not want to enter a war and other ASEAN countries are not exactly standing up with them. In fact, Vietnam, which for years was the lead anti-Chinese country on the South China Sea, has actually become quite quiet and dormant. We have to see this in the light of China militarizing the Spratly Islands, which in 2015, President Xi had clearly told ASEAN they would never do. So the Chinese are not keeping their word, not abiding by any agreements even initiated by them, so really are very untrustworthy and violent partners.
And how should India be weighing this? Because India not only has stakes in that particular region where these confrontations are going on, but it has an unresolved boundary with China, because of which there's been confrontation in eastern Ladakh, and since then our ties have not been normal.
Indeed, so I think India has made it very clear to China that because the situation on our border is not normal, the relationship cannot be normal. And while discussions at the military level, diplomatic level, some at the level of the ministers go on, there has been no solution to India's issues. Now, India thinks that we should not allow China to up their stake in the Indian Ocean region. So therefore, India keeps calling for China to abide by a rules-based international order, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which the Chinese are loath to do. So recently, when the Malaysian Prime Minister was here, India made this clear. Earlier, the Vietnamese Prime Minister was here, and India also made that clear. In the India-Japan 2+2, which happened in between these two visits, this issue was clearly discussed. So India is upping the ante by deploying its Navy and Coast Guard more frequently in the area. And while Philippines is having a problem, an Indian naval ship visited Philippines, an Indian submarine visited Jakarta in Indonesia. So our presence is being noted. The question comes up, is there going to be a clash between, let us say, American ships if they choose to escort the Filipino supply missions, or what happens if an Indian ship runs into a Chinese ship? So with the Chinese, this miscommunication and misunderstanding issues can very easily come up because they don't do things on a misunderstanding. They do it on a planned basis and then pretend that it was in error. I think we need to be very careful about Chinese intentions.
But do you think that China feels that it can take on the collective might of whoever it confronts, because whoever it confronts to a certain extent will perhaps have the backing of the United States?
Certainly the United States is there, but I think Japan, India and Australia, plus some European powers, are now more visible in the Indo-Pacific. Recently, the Germans, the Italians, the British, the French, everybody was there for exercises. RIMPAC in Hawaii, and then with Japan, then with Australia, and more recently, Tarang Shakti with India. Now, we are all there, but I don't think anybody is ready to pick up a fight. And that will happen only of a grave miscalculation by China. But if they miscalculate and, for instance, kill somebody, I think they would be retaliate. And that certainly is a danger for our region. Meanwhile, we need to watch the Taiwan issue very closely, because that is where miscalculation can happen more frequently and more suddenly.
Well, let's hope it doesn't. Thanks a lot for joining us to talk about it this evening, Ambassador Gurjeet Singh.
Thank you.
Now, India has been declared the world's fastest growing major economy by the International Monetary Fund's latest World Economic Outlook report as of July 2024. The country has outperformed the major economies such as China, the US and Russia. The IMF forecasts India's economic growth to reach an impressive 7% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025. Currently, India ranks as the 5th largest economy globally in terms of gross domestic product, but is poised to ascend to the 3rd spot in the near future, solidifying its position as a dominant player in the global economic landscape. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar welcomed Brazilian Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira for the 9th India-Brazil Joint Commission meeting in New Delhi on Tuesday. At the opening remarks of the meet, Dr. Jaishankar said that India looks forward to discussing key G20 outcomes from India's G20 presidency last year. Vieira's visit is an opportunity to explore new avenues of cooperation in bilateral, regional and multilateral arenas across diverse sectors. The Ministry of External Affairs said that the meet will provide further impetus to the strategic partnership between India and Brazil. The Brazilian Foreign Minister is on an official 4-day visit to India.
Let me also begin by congratulating Brazil for conducting the G20 meeting successfully and also on the first ministerial consensus document realized during the G20 Development Working Group ministerial meeting. I'd like to reiterate India's full support to the Brazilian G20 presidency and also recall that we got your fullest support during our own presidency. We also have a very important energy cooperation between our two countries and we of course have particularly valued the biofuels cooperation that India and Brazil have established.
Let's also now take a look at some other stories making news around the country. Now, Bharat Biotech International has launched an oral cholera vaccine. The cholera vaccine was brought in the name of HailCal. Bharat Biotech has announced that it has developed an oral vaccine to address shortage of such inoculations. India has registered a significant growth of 7.12% in the overall coal production so far this year. The Ministry of Coal in the statement said the cumulative coal production for this financial year as of the 25th of August has increased to 370.67 million tonnes compared to 346.02 million tonnes during the same period last year. India's Textiles Ministry has approved 4 startups with a grant of approximately $60,000 each. The 4 startups have received grants under the Grant for Research and Entrepreneurship across the Aspiring Innovators in Technical Textiles scheme. These startups are focused on key strategic areas of composites, sustainable textiles and smart textiles. And still to come on DD India News Hour. the Paralympics to kick off with the opening ceremony in Paris on Wednesday. And India's 15-member squad for upcoming Women's T20 World Cup has been announced. The tournament will be held in October.
This week on Defense Dynamics, we will tell you about defense and diplomacy panning out from Poland, Ukraine and right up to United States of America. What does this mean in real tangible terms? How does this underscore India's multipolar worldview by exercising strategic autonomy and much more? Also, what's the strategic implication of Indian military officers being stationed with different US commands? Watch Defense Dynamics this week on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. IST on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Gautam Roy. Now, the changing weather conditions are leading to rising of sea levels at an accelerated rate, especially in the far more vulnerable Pacific Island nations. According to the report released on worsening sea level rise by UN and World Meteorological Organization, addressing the Pacific Islands Forum in Tonga, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued yet another climate SOS to the world. This time, he said those initials stand out for Save Our Seas.
The world must look to the Pacific and listen to science. This is a crazy situation. Rising seas are a crisis entirely of humanity's making. A crisis that will soon swell to an almost unimaginable scale with no lifeboat to take us back to safety. But if we save the Pacific, we also save ourselves. The world must act and enter the SOS before it's too late.
Now, the Maldives police have issued a statement claiming that the Bank of Maldives' decision to limit the availability of dollars for credit cards was part of a coup attempt. The police are currently investigating this alleged coup attempt. According to the statement, opposition parties and hundreds of Twitter bots were involved in this plot. President Mohamed Muizzu also remarked while speaking at his party rally last night that the National Bank, in which the government holds a 62% share, attempted a coup against his own administration. Let's stand now to get some sporting updates as well. Now, the current Honorary Secretary of the Indian Cricket Board, Jai Shah, has been elected unopposed as the independent chair of the International Cricket Council. Shah will assume his position on the 1st of December this year. The announcement was made on the 20th of August that current ICC Chair Greg Barclay would not seek a third term and would step down at the conclusion of his tenure in November. Jai Shah, who was the sole nominee for the chairpersonship, emphasized his commitment to expanding the global reach and popularity of cricket, especially with its upcoming inclusion in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympic Games. As India gears up for the Paris 2024 Paralympics, the anticipation is high with the country's largest ever contingent set to compete there. Scheduled from the 28th of this month to the 8th of next, the Games will feature 84 Indian athletes, a significant increase from the 54 who participated at the Tokyo Paralympics. Take a look at some of the Indian medal prospects.
Avni Lekra, parachuting. Avni Lekra made history at the Tokyo 2020 as the first Indian woman to win Paralympic gold. She excelled in the 10-meter air rifle SH1 event and also won bronze in the 50-meter rifle 3 positions SH1. Lekra's continued dominance in shooting is highly anticipated as she returns to defend her titles in Paris. Sumit Antil, para-athletics. Sumit Antil, the gold medalist in the men's F64 javelin throw, at the Tokyo Paralympics, is a two-time world champion and holds the world record in his category. Antil's exceptional form and previous successes make him a leading contender for gold in Paris Paralympic Games. Manish Narwal, parachuting. Manish Narwal clinched gold medal in the mixed 50-meter pistol SH1 event at the Tokyo Paralympics. His sharpshooting skills and previous accolades place him among the top competitors in Paris Games. Krishna Nagar, para-badminton. Krishna Nagar secured gold in men's singles SH6 at Tokyo 2020. His exceptional performance and previous successes make him a strong candidate for a medal in Paris Paralympic Games. Sheetal Devi, para-archery. At 17, Sheetal Devi is a rising star in para-archery. She won gold in the individual compound and mixed team compound events at the 2022 Asian Para Games, and her strong performances make her a strong contender for the Paris Paralympic Games also. Suyash Jadhav, para-swimming. Suyash Jadhav is prominent para-swimmer, won gold in the 50-meter butterfly at the Asian Para Games. He will compete in the multiple events, including the 50-meter freestyle and 100-meter backstroke, aiming to build on his past successes. Naran Singh's report, DD India.
Now, several athletes competing at the Paris Paralympics spoke about their excitement and pride about the upcoming Games. The Games will kick off with an opening ceremony in central Paris on the 28th of August, which is on Wednesday, that's tomorrow, where nearly 4,400 athletes will compete in 22 sports.
It's going to be a party like nothing else. It's going to unite people across the whole world. It's going to expose a diversity with a positive attitude, and attitude that gives hope and examples on differences and how you can solve different situations.
Knowing that it's going to get better every year, so we're going to step up. We stepped up from Rio. These are the games that I know. We stepped up from Rio. We stepped up from Tokyo. We are so visible, and I think we need to see it as like a challenge to make it even better. We need to see it as a challenge to make it more visible for other people. And if everyone is along on that journey, then we can make it grow as athletes as well. So hopefully we can see it as a challenge as well to hopefully make it even better for the next one.
Now, the Board of Cricket Control of India on Tuesday announced India's 15-member squad to feature in the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup 2024 to be played in United Arab Emirates in October. The women in blue, who reached the semi-finals in the previous edition, are placed in Group A of the competition along with Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. More in this report.
The Indian Cricket Board BCCI announced India's 15-member squad for the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup 2024 in the United Arab Emirates. Harmanpreet Kaur will lead the side, with Smriti Mandhana named her deputy. Richa Ghosh and Yastika Bhatia are the designated wicketkeepers in the side. India's batting core will be rounded by opener Shafali Verma, Jemimah Rodriguez and Dylan Hemlata in the top order. All-rounder Deepti Sharma, left-arm spinner Radha Yadav and leg spinner Asha Shobna will lead the spin department. All-rounder Shriyanka Patil has also been named in the squad. Patil has yet to recover from a finger injury that she sustained during the recent Asia Cup. India have only made one change from their recent Women's Asia Cup campaign in Sri Lanka, with Bhatia replacing Uma Chetri in the 15-member team. The 15-member squad are Harmanpreet Kaur, Smriti Mandhana, Shafali Verma, Deepti Sharma, Jemimah Rodriguez, Richa Ghosh, Yastika Bhatia, Pooja Vastrakar, Arundhati Reddy, Renuka Singh Thakur, Dylan Hemlata, Asha Shobna, Radha Yadav, Shriyanka Patil and Sajeevan Sajna, while Uma Chetri, Tanuja Kanwar and Saima Thakur has been named as the travelling reserves. The T20 World Cup will begin from October 3, with India opening their campaign against New Zealand on October 4, before a marquee clash against Pakistan on October 6. They meet Sri Lanka on 9th before taking on Australia on October 13th. Sports Desk, DD India.
The International Cricket Council has announced the revised schedule for 2024 Women's T20 World Cup as well, which will be held in the UAE. According to the new schedule, Bangladesh will face Scotland in the opening match on the 3rd of October in Sharjah. India will start its campaign against New Zealand on the 4th and will clash with arch rivals Pakistan on the 6th of October. 2023 runners-up South Africa will play West Indies in their opening match on the 4th of October in Dubai. Defending champions Australia will start their campaign on the 5th of October in Sharjah against Sri Lanka. The top two teams from the two groups will qualify for the semi-finals scheduled for the 17th and 18th of October in Dubai. The final will also be held in Dubai on the 20th of October. The tournament was originally to be held in Bangladesh but has now been moved to the UAE. Now, popular British rock band Oasis is set to make a comeback after 15 years with a series of live shows in 2025. The band announced tickets will go on sale from Saturday. They announced their plan of reunion with brothers Noel and Liam Gallagher in a series of live shows starting from the 4th of July next year, after the brothers who had split the band because of a dispute made up. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India News Hour. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen and download the app now. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.